Hi guys, and welcome back to aud205. This is going to be class 6. Today we're going to be looking at a short animation clip, and I'm going to show you a few different things about, especially with animation, you get the freedom to set the tone, but also you have a lot of freedom as far as how everything sounds because there is no sound initially. So today we're going to make a new multi-track session, and I'm going to call this a mouse animation. And got the folder set up already. And then we need to load in our clip, which is it's going to be in your aud205 files 06 folder, or zip archive that you download. And now we need to create a video track here. So we can just drop this in here and it'll set up. So first thing I'll tell you is that this clip is actually a 25 frames per second video, and so we need to change our project rate to 25 frames per second, and then we can start this down the timeline a little bit, maybe 5 or 10 seconds in. All right. So if we want to watch this, it's our little guy walking here, and he's gonna buy some water and he's gonna fall through some water. All right. The first thing that we really want to do is kind of set the tone. And to do that, you typically start working with your backgrounds. I usually do backgrounds first to kind of set up the atmosphere. And then that also sets the tone for what you want to do with your character here. And so going back to our media browser here, in the Adobe sound effects libraries, we have a bunch of ambiences. They got ambience 1, ambience 2. And in ambience 2, I've kind of cruised through this already a little bit, and they have a subdivision distant lawnmower. Let's give that a listen. So I think that sounds pretty good, at least for a start. Just going to drop that in. I like this one too, just as another layer. That sounds a little too much like night. So, alrighty, so we can start there. This first one has a bit of a lawnmower in it. I like the lawnmower, but it sounds a little dark and a little ominous. So I'm going to highlight this clip and take it over into our waveform editor and just apply a simple EQ to it to roll off some of that low end filter parametric EQ. And so just hit the high pass button and roll this up to say like 200 or so. That should clean that up for us. So here's without. Maybe a little more. So then we can apply that to the clip. And now we can go back to multi-track and our clip should have that processing on it. Yep. So I always start later in the clip, because you'll see if you start right at the beginning, there's a fade in on the sound effect. So we don't want that. We want it to start full on. So we can come over here and switch over to our razor tool, hit R and make an edit point, hit B to delete. So we can, there's different rules when it comes to sound effects editing, especially with backgrounds. I subscribe to the 1 frame before the edit with a 1 frame fade philosophy, and I typically will, if I do that, I'll do a cosine fade so it smooths in. So then it's fading up right on the edit point. Then we can go down to the end. So we're out. This picture's out here. So that's one frame out. We can do the same thing, one frame over at the end. Cut that. That'll work for our second clip as well. And then we can do one frame fade. Cosine. Just go ahead and edit this one while we're here. And then go back to the beginning. We'll just cut this off because we know we want that gone. Pull out the head here. Fade that guy in, switch it over. Okay, so now let's see how we got our little backgrounds here. So that's also something to keep in mind, is that we don't see a lawnmower, but it's a residential neighborhood. You can add a dog bark, you can add some distant traffic, you can add a bunch of stuff to kind of set the mood of what kind of neighborhood this is. If it's too quiet and there's nothing else going on, say it's just this tree, it seems to lose some of that neighborhoody feel, even though we don't see the lawnmower. But it does add that kind of residential neighborhood feel with a lawnmower. All right, so that's working okay. I feel like the top end on these trees is maybe just a little too much, so I'm gonna back that off just a hair. So again, we're gonna go to Effects, Filters, EQs, and this time we're gonna use the high shelf and just bring that back a little bit. So you can see how the high-end wash is. We can just kind of get some of that tone in there. All right, so apply that. Go back to multi-track. So now we have our and both of these have some birds in it already, which is fine. If you want to add more birds, you can. So play around with this. You'll quickly figure out that, you know, if you put a city ambience on a residential clip, then it's not going to sit right. But there's no right or wrong when it comes to what kind of tone you want to set up. That's kind of part of the fun of sound design. Is you are the sound designer, so you get to pick what you want this story to tell. So anyway, we're gonna I'm gonna organize this project just a little bit before we get too far. So I'm gonna load up the properties panel here, and I'm going to select my two clips. I'm going to set my backgrounds to, let's say, yellow. All right, so we can call this background 1 and background 2. Kind of tuck these up a little bit to get some more room. All right, so the next thing we'll probably want to do is add some footsteps to our guy. And this is where Mickey Mousing is most commonly referred to, where every action of a cartoon character is accentuated with music. And so I'm sure you've heard a million times where they use a xylophone to do ding, 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 ding for each footstep. So that whole term is called Mickey Mousing. If we wanted to use something else, in this case, we just give him normal footsteps. You have a lot of different choices as far as how you want your character to be perceived just in the footsteps. So again, looking at the Adobe sound effects that I provided, if you click on the Foley footsteps, the first batch are all singles. So a single. All right. So in this case, you know, a hard sole dress shoe walking on cement. That might give a nice texture for us, at least to try out. We can try that might do something else as well. It's a little lighter since he's a mouse. And then just for fun, I'll show you this one. All All right. So now we have 3 different shoe variations for this guy. And this is where I usually get the video pretty big so I can see it real clearly. All right, so this is where you use the arrow tool. So the arrow, we can arrow right until we see his foot land. Like that. That's where we'll make our first edit. Now, typically the second sound, so we have a click, depending on what kind of shoe it is, the heel drops and then the front drops. So in this case, you'll see that there's, you know, this is click, click, and then this is more just a solid sound. And then the high heels walking on the boardwalk have a strong heel and then a front click as well. So then let's kind of line these up until we figure out which one we like. All right, so then we got another one here. This is where you can use the razor tool to set an edit point ahead of time and then, you know, just kind of work it in. Give ourselves some working room here. That one lined up. So that's our next one. There. And then that looks like it there. Get that for now. We got one there. And on the next one. All right, so let's see how this one's sounding. All right, it's a little hollow, I think, for what we're trying to do. See how this one sounds. I think this one's probably the closest. I just need to thin it out some. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use that EQ again. Parametric and high pass. We're going to clear that. Bring this up. There we go. So nice and high. So we're getting rid of all that heavy stuff. So now when we listen to this, it should be a little closer. Sounds like there's a double in there. I think it's just this. All right. So that's sounding better. If we wanted to make this one work, let me see what this is sounding like. I think if we did the same thing and just cleaned up the bottom. Yeah, can use some of that grit for the concrete sound. So now these two together might actually complement each other. My editing's a little bad though. All right, so I'm going to finish up this edit real quick. So then we got water, water, and splash. So this is the end of our normal footsteps here. So let's see if we can get this bottom one to work too. Yeah. So I still think this is probably our best shot. Even though I did all that work, I'm going to delete these other ones because I don't like them. Let's hear how it sounds with our backgrounds, since we have to be conscious of that. So my only complaint is that they sound pretty close in perspective to what's going on. So we're going to add some reverb to that a little bit later. The other thing I want to do is I want to give him a squeak in his left foot, because I think that is what comedy is all about, is a squeaky shoe. And so I think that's pretty funny. So it could be pretty quiet here. So we got our left. I'm only going to use the front part of that because it's pretty quick. It's probably going to squeak when it comes down on it. Yeah. And then somewhere here. We can give him a squeak when it goes underwater. We just affect it later. So let's see how close I am. Pretty close. Felt like the other ones were a little too early. So, slide them back. Let's try that. So now we got a squeaky shoe. I think the other thing we can do is we can give his arms and some clothing some motion. So let's find a cloth Foley effect. Yeah, I think that works. It's just a little thick, so we just got to thin it out some. So we'll go to waveform, we'll thin this out. EQ. Don't want to lose too much of it. Apply that. No, I'm actually going to try and pitch this up. Stretch and pitch. So there's two different ways to do time and pitch correction. One is to use an algorithm to maintain a certain time or a certain pitch. And if you say, for instance, you want to leave it at the same pitch, you just want to make it twice as long, you can go to 200% and then you can listen to it. And it's slower. You can do, 8% if you want to. And the other algorithm is going to sound slightly different. So it can be useful for effects if you want that kind of matrixy, transformery computer sound, The other thing you can do is you can set this to 100% and you can just pitch it down. Or you can pitch it up. So this keeps the length the same. But it introduces a bunch of artifacts regardless. So one thing you can do is you can set this to 0 and you can now say lock, stretch, and time pitch. So when you turn it down, it gets longer. And when you turn it up, it gets shorter. So if we pitch this up, 10%, it preserves more of the actual sound integrity. It's kind of like it's a tape style. So if you were to play the tape slower, then you would naturally get a lower pitch. And if you play the tape higher, you would get more chickmonkey sound effects. So depending on what you're looking for, I try to work in this mode first with the lock, stretch, and pitch enabled so that you preserve more of the integrity of the sound. You're not introducing an algorithm. You're just slowing it down or speeding it up. So we can try pitching this up a little bit. Might be a little fast for how he's walking. Yeah, it's pretty close. So it's basically going to warn you that its sync in the multi-track session is going to be a little different now. It gives you a little warning, which is nice. So we want that to hit right when he crosses his legs, I think, to make this a little bigger so I can see the waveform. we're going to duplicate this to put a little bit more on there. I just copied and pasted it on there again. I'm going to have his legs cross, sort of about there. There. So we could probably get away with a little crossfade, but the thing about it is our ears can pick up that repeat pretty easily. So I'm going to go up to clip and I'm going to say convert to a unique copy, because otherwise when I pitch shift this one again, then I'm going to actually process both of them. And then I go to waveform and now I can do anything I want to that second repeat clip. I'm just going to pitch it down a little bit from where we were. Since our history is now gone on that unique copy, I can't modify it again, but I can at least process the copy. And now I only get a warning on one clip, so I dismiss that. And so now let's look at our video. Now the thing about it is now it might be a little out of sync. That's not too bad. So I just need to crossfade this a little bit so that you don't hear that edit quite so much. Nice. All right, so let's see how that works with our footsteps. Probably just a little loud in perspective. I want to feel it. I don't necessarily want to hear it. We come in. I feel like I'm missing the first start of that section there. So I'm going to just copy one of these footsteps, put it at the head of it. Okay. So let's see how we're sitting with the ambiances. All right. I feel like I just got to turn the rest of these guys up some. All right, so now we need our little splashes. So we can do liquid water. I believe there's that was pretty good. So I think I'm going to pitch this one up just a little bit. So go up. Yeah. Okay. So now we can convert it to a unique copy, and then we'll pitch this one a little differently than the other one so that they, even though they're the same clip, they don't sound the same. Maybe just not quite as high. So now we have a So that squeak's gonna have to be quieter. And we got a big splash. So we can even start with this as our first element. And then we can maybe add a second splash to it. It's kind of funny. So the thing about cartoons is that to remember to keep it light-hearted and kind of funny. I think I just need to extend these out a little bit more because I'm hearing the edits. Yeah. All right, so that's funny, I think. So I'm going to use the Option B command to make a new bus. I'm going to call this reverb. So then, since we're dealing with all sound effects here, we won't have separate splits. All right, so now I just need to feed these clips into the reverb. So to do that, I'm going to go to the mixer, and then so let me just name these. So this will be SFX1, SFX2, SFX3, and then go to the mixer and we'll feed SFX1 into send1. Send1 is going to go to the reverb. If you need to get to more sends, so you can just scroll down here to up to 16. So you can do send 1 through 16. And then we're going to feed 0 dB into the reverb from where our mix position is. So it's all proportional. Now we're also feeding it to the master, so the reverb then also feeds the master. So this is just an additional path to get reverb into here. We do that so we can use just one reverb processor for all three of these tracks instead of one per track. Reverb tends to be one of the more heavier processor loads. So if you can pare it down and you know you're going to use the same setting across all three, then we can start there. So then we go to the effects rack and then we add go to reverb and add the convolution reverb. So now we just got to find a space that fits what we're trying to do. I think the gallery sounded the cleanest. Now remember, we're feeding the signal to both the output and to the reverb. So we're basically hearing a 50-50 mix right now, even though we're at 100% reverb, because we're getting 100% clean signal as well coming out. So now what you can do is turn this down in the mixer. You can walk it down into place. So let's see how that sounds. So my only complaint is that I think that these splashes are a little too thick. So I'm going to roll off some of that low end, go to EQ, apply, go to the next one, EQ, apply, and so for this last one, if you don't necessarily want to process your effects to the clip every single time, you can use the clip effects, and the clip effects from the multi-track editor, you go to effects and you do the same thing, but instead of hitting apply to render it back to the clip, you then have it in real time, so that each time you play over it, your CPU's rendering this effect on this clip. I find that when you have a real heavy sound design project going with multiple tracks, multiple effects, it can eventually slow down your system too much to have too many real-time effects. So I've just gotten in the habit of always going to waveform effects and then processing the clip to where I like it, and then just making sure that it's what I want. Sweet. So I think that's pretty good. Let me hear it back. So I think I want just a little bit more tail on that reverb. So I'm going to turn it up some. So now if I turn off that reverb, you'll hear the difference. Versus so it just adds a little space on those effects so they're not quite so present right in your face. So yeah, that is kind of an intro to sound design. And feel free to post your what you guys come up with in the forums. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. If you have access to more sound effects, feel free to use those and just play around with it. Have fun. It is comedy after all, so feel free to throw in some jokes and stuff in there. And I will see you guys next week. Take care. Bye-bye.